The bartender's hands were shaking as she poured vodka into the rocks glass. Not from nerves. From rage. "I said I'm not interested." The words came out louder this time, sharp enough to cut through the bass-heavy music pulsing through the upscale Manhattan lounge. Every syllable carried the weight of the previous 20 minutes. 20 minutes of polite deflections, forced smiles, and increasingly desperate attempts to make this man understand that no meant no. His hand clamped down on her wrist. Hard. "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that." Brad. Or was it Chad? She'd stopped listening after he'd trapped her in this corner booth, leaned closer, his breath reeking of bourbon and entitlement. "I bought you 3 drinks. The least you can do is be friendly." Sarah Mitchell felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The leather booth that had seemed so cozy an hour ago now felt like a cage. He'd positioned himself between her and the exit, his 6-foot frame blocking any easy escape. The after-work crowd that packed Romano's on Friday nights suddenly felt like a blur of indifferent strangers. No one was watching. No one was coming to help. "You didn't buy me anything," she managed, trying to pull her arm back. His grip tightened. "I paid for my own drinks." That was true. She'd been careful about that, especially after he'd started giving off wrong vibes around the 15-minute mark. Sarah had learned to trust her instincts the hard way. At 46, divorced for 3 years, she wasn't some naive girl who didn't recognize danger when it wore a tailored suit and a Rolex. But recognizing danger and escaping it were 2 different things. "Don't be a tease." His other hand landed on her thigh, sliding upward. "You came here alone, dressed like that. You knew what you wanted." The black dress she'd chosen that morning for her presentation, professional, modest, appropriate, suddenly felt like evidence in a trial she hadn't agreed to participate in. Her stomach turned. This was bad. This was really bad. "Get your hand off me!" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Now!" He laughed. Actually laughed. "Or what? You gonna scream? Make a scene?" "Nobody here cares, sweetheart. Trust me." That's when Sarah remembered. The sign in the women's bathroom. The one she'd noticed 3 months ago when Romano's first opened. The one that had made her think this was a safe place, a good place to stop for a drink after work. The one that explained what to do if you ever felt unsafe. She caught the bartender's eye. The woman was watching now, her dark eyes sharp and assessing. Sarah mouthed the words carefully, hoping she'd remember the exact phrasing. "I need an angel shot. With lime." The bartender's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze. Understanding. Maybe even satisfaction. She gave the smallest nod and turned toward the phone mounted on the wall behind the bar. Brad or Chad must have sensed the shift, because his grip on her wrist turned painful. "What was that? What did you just say to her?" "Nothing. I just ordered a drink." Sarah's pulse roared in her ears. The bartender was dialing. It was going to be okay. Security would come, or the manager, or maybe she was calling the police. The sign had said, "With lime," meant, call the police. She'd be safe soon. She just had to hold on. "You're lying." His face was close enough now that she could see the vein pulsing in his temple, the red flush creeping up his neck. "You know what I think? I think you've been playing games all night, leading me on. I never..." The words died in her throat as his hand moved higher up her thigh, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. Maybe I should take what I paid for. Terror, sharp and crystalline, shot through her body. She opened her mouth to scream, "Audience be damned," but before she could make a sound, a phone rang. Loud, insistent, right behind the bar. The bartender picked it up, listened for maybe 3 seconds, and then her eyes went wide. Not with fear, with something else. Something that looked almost like panic. "Oh God," she whispered into the phone. "Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Yes, the corner booth. Yes, immediately." She hung up and practically sprinted around the bar, moving faster than Sarah had seen anyone move in heels that high. But she wasn't heading for Sarah's table. She was heading for the door. The private door behind the bar, the one marked management only. What was happening? Why wasn't she calling security? Why wasn't she... The door burst open. For a moment, Sarah's fear-soaked brain couldn't process what she was seeing. The man who stepped through that door didn't look like a manager. He didn't look like security. He looked like violence wrapped in a $3,000 suit. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Beautiful and absolutely terrifying in equal measure. His eyes, pale, gray, and cold as a winter storm, swept the room with the casual authority of someone who owned everything he surveyed. And maybe he did, because every head in Romano's turned, every conversation stopped. Even the music seemed to lower, as if the building itself was holding its breath. The bartender was speaking to him in rapid, urgent whispers, pointing toward Sarah's booth. Those gray eyes locked onto her location, and Sarah felt the impact like a physical force. Then they shifted slightly to the left, to Brad or Chad, to the hand still gripping her wrist, still touching her thigh. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. The man moved with the fluid grace of a predator, crossing the space between the bar and the booth in long, purposeful strides. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, people stumbling over themselves to get out of his way. Sarah watched him approach, some distant part of her brain screaming that she should be more afraid, but the rest of her was transfixed. He stopped at their table. Up close, he was even more imposing, at least 6'3", with the kind of build that suggested both the gym and actual practical violence. There was a scar, thin and white, cutting through his left eyebrow. His hands, she noticed, were scarred too. These weren't the soft hands of a businessman. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. "Remove your hands from her. Now." Brad or Chad's head snapped up, his expression cycling through confusion, irritation, and then, when he actually registered who was standing there, something that might have been recognition, or fear. Maybe both. "Hey, listen, this is a private conversation. I don't repeat myself." 4 words. That's all it took. 4 words delivered in a tone that suggested violence wasn't a possibility, but an absolute certainty, and Brad or Chad's hands jerked away from Sarah like she'd suddenly burst into flames. He was sliding out of the booth, stumbling over his own feet in his haste to put distance between himself and this stranger. We were just... She wanted... Stop talking." The man's eyes never left Brad or Chad's face, but Sarah felt the weight of his attention anyway, as if he were somehow aware of every breath she took, every slight tremor in her hands. "Apologize to the lady." What? Who the hell are you, man? You can't just... 1 step forward. That's all it took. 1 single step, and Brad or Chad's bravado shattered like cheap glass. "I'm sorry," the words tumbled out in a rush. "I'm sorry, okay? I didn't mean it was a misunderstanding. Get out." "Yeah. Yes. I'm going. He was already moving, practically running toward the exit, nearly knocking over a waitress in his desperate flight. The gray-eyed man watched him go, tracking his retreat with the cold patience of someone who knew exactly how far their power extended. Only when the door swung shut behind Brad or Chad's retreating form did he turn his attention to Sarah. She should thank him. That's what you did when someone helped you. But the words wouldn't come. She was shaking now, the adrenaline that had kept her sharp and focused finally draining away, leaving her hollow and trembling. "Are you hurt?" His voice was different now. Still quiet, but softer. Almost gentle. Sarah shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. Her wrist throbbed where Brad or Chad had gripped it. Her thigh ached. But hurt? No, she'd been so close, but... "You're safe now." He said it like a fact, like a promise, like nothing in this world or any other could touch her as long as he stood there. "I'm going to sit down. Is that all right?" The question surprised her. After the display of raw authority she'd just witnessed, she'd expected him to simply do what he wanted. Instead, he waited, patient and still, for her permission. She nodded. He slid into the booth, Not where Brad or Chad had been, thankfully, but on the opposite side, giving her space. The bartender appeared as if summoned, setting down 2 glasses of water and a small first aid kit before disappearing again without a word. "Your wrist," he said, nodding toward her hand. Sarah looked down. Bruises were already forming, dark purple against her pale skin. She hadn't even realized how hard Brad or Chad had been holding her. "Let me see." This time it wasn't a question, but it wasn't a command either. Something in between. An offer wrapped in certainty. Sarah found herself extending her arm across the table before she'd consciously decided to move. His hands were warm as they closed around her wrist, his touch impossibly gentle for someone who'd just radiated such menace. He examined the bruising with clinical precision, his thumb brushing over her pulse point. She felt her heartbeat stutter at the contact. "Nothing broken," he said finally, "but you'll want ice when you get home." His eyes lifted to meet hers, and Sarah felt her breath catch. Up close, those gray eyes weren't cold at all. They were molten silver, burning with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "What's your name?" "Sarah." Her voice came out rougher than intended. "Sarah Mitchell. Sarah." He said it like he was tasting it, rolling it around in his mouth to test the flavor. "I'm Dante Romano." Romano, the same name as the lounge, which meant, "You own this place." A slight curve of his lips. Not quite a smile, but close. "I own several places. This is one of them." He released her wrist slowly, as if reluctant to break the contact. "The bartender, Maria, she called me directly. Protocol for an angel shot with lime is to call the police, but Maria knows that in my establishments I handle these situations personally. The police weren't coming." The realization settled over her like cold water. "When I ordered the angel shot, I came instead." "Why?" Something shifted in his expression. "Because I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours." The words came out automatically, defensive. "No," he agreed. "Not yet. But you asked for help in my establishment. That makes you my responsibility. And I take my responsibilities very seriously, Sarah." The way he said her name sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way he was looking at her, like she was the only person in the world, like everyone else in this crowded lounge had simply ceased to exist. "I should go." She started to slide out of the booth, but his hand lifted in a small gesture, not blocking her. Just, "Wait, please." That word again, please, as if her choice mattered. "You've had a shock. Let me arrange a car to take you home, or a security escort if you'd prefer to drive yourself. I can get a cab. You could." His eyes held hers. "But you won't feel safe. Not tonight. Not after what just happened. And you deserve to feel safe, Sarah." He was right. God help her. He was right. The thought of standing on a dark street corner, waiting for an Uber, wondering if Brad or Chad was lurking somewhere nearby, her hands started trembling again. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. He seemed like the kind of man who noticed everything. 5 minutes, he said quietly. "Give me 5 minutes to make arrangements. Have some water. Breathe. And then I'll personally ensure you get home safely. You don't have to. I know I don't have to." The intensity in his voice made her fall silent. "I want to." There was something in those 3 words that felt like more than simple courtesy. Something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. But before she could analyze it, before she could question what was happening, he was already signaling to someone across the room. A massive man with a shaved head and a suit that barely contained his linebacker shoulders. "Marco will escort you to your car, or we can arrange for my driver." Dante's eyes never left her face. "Whatever makes you feel safest." "Your driver," she heard herself say. If you're sure." "I'm sure." He stood, and suddenly he was towering over her again, but it felt different now. Protective rather than threatening. Come with me. Sarah shouldn't trust this easily. She knew that. After what had just happened with Brad or Chad, after years of learning that men who seemed too good to be true usually were, she should be running in the opposite direction. But something about Dante Romano felt different. Dangerous, yes. Possibly even more dangerous than Brad or Chad in his own way, but not dangerous to her. She stood and the room tilted slightly. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard now, making her legs feel like water. Dante's hand was at her elbow instantly, steadying her, supporting her weight without making her feel weak. "Easy," he murmured so quiet only she could hear. "I've got you." And the terrifying thing was, she believed him. He guided her through the lounge, past the staring crowds, past the bartender who looked at her with something like relief, past the massive bouncer at the door who nodded respectfully at Dante and called him boss. Outside, the November air bit through her thin coat, but Dante was already shrugging out of his suit jacket, draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. It was heavy, still warm from his body, and it smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Something masculine and clean that made her want to pull it tighter around herself. A black town car pulled up to the curb, sleek and expensive. The driver jumped out, opening the back door with the kind of deference that confirmed what Sarah had already suspected. Dante Romano wasn't just some wealthy bar owner. He was someone. Someone important. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. "Marco will follow behind," Dante said, helping her into the car. "Standard precaution, and I'll need your address." She rattled it, off, still feeling like she was moving through a dream. Or maybe a nightmare that had somehow transformed into something else entirely. Dante leaned against the car door, his face level with hers, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, the harsh lines around his mouth that suggested he didn't smile often. "Lock your doors when you get home. Check your windows. And take this." He pressed a business card into her hand, along with something else, a sleek, black phone. "My personal number is programmed in. If you feel unsafe at any point tonight, you call me. Understood? I can't take your phone. You can, and you will." The command was back in his voice, brooking no argument. "Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. Even if it's just a talk. Even if you think it's nothing. You call me." Sarah looked down at the phone, then back at him. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me." His hand came up, and for a heart-stopping moment she thought he might touch her face. Instead, his fingers ghosted over the bruise on her wrist, not quite making contact, his expression darkening. "No one touches what's mine," he said softly. "And as of tonight, Sarah Mitchell, you're under my protection, whether you want to be or not." Before she could respond, before she could even process what he'd just said, he stepped back and closed the door. The driver pulled away from the curb, and Sarah twisted in her seat to look back. Dante stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the car until it turned the corner and he disappeared from view. She looked down at the phone in her hand, at the bruises on her wrist, at his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. What the hell had just happened? The drive to her apartment in Brooklyn took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of silence broken only by the driver's occasional murmured updates into his earpiece, reporting their location, their progress, their safe arrival. Marco followed in a second car, his presence a constant shadow that should have felt oppressive, but somehow didn't. When they pulled up to her building, the driver was out of the car before she could reach for the door handle. He escorted her all the way to her apartment door, waited while she unlocked it, and checked the interior with professional efficiency before nodding his approval. "Lock the door, ma'am. Bolt and chain. Mr. Romano will be checking in." Then he was gone, and Sarah was alone in her small one-bedroom apartment, still wearing Dante Romano's jacket, still holding his phone, still trying to understand what had just happened. She locked the door. Bolt and chain, just like the driver had said. Then she walked to her bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked like a disaster. Mascara smudged, lipstick worn off, hair mussed from Brad or Chad's grabbing hands. But her eyes looked different. Wide and bright and more alive than they'd felt in months. Maybe years. The phone buzzed in her hand, making her jump, a text message from an unknown number. "Are you home safely?" She didn't have to ask who it was. "Yes," she typed back. "Your driver and Marco were very professional. Thank you." "Good. You should eat something. The adrenaline crash will make you hungry." Sarah blinked at the screen. How did he know? But of course he knew. He'd probably seen this before. Dealt with situations like this before. How many times? How many other women had he rescued? The thought made something uncomfortable twist in her chest. Something that felt suspiciously like jealousy, which was insane. She'd known this man for all of 30 minutes. "I will," she typed. "And thank you, again, for everything." "Don't thank me, Sarah. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we'll talk." Tomorrow. What was there to talk about tomorrow? But before she could ask, another message came through. "Keep the phone charged, keep it with you, and call me if you need anything." "I will. Good night, Dante." She stared at the screen for a long moment after she sent that last message, half expecting another response, but none came. She set the phone on her nightstand, plugged it in to charge, and forced herself through the motions of getting ready for bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Brad or Chad's face, felt his hands on her, heard his voice telling her that no one cared, that no one would help. He'd been wrong. Someone had cared. Someone had helped. A dangerous someone with gray eyes and scarred hands, and enough power to make grown men flee with a single step. Sarah pulled Dante's jacket tighter around herself, and finally let herself cry. The weekend passed in a strange haze. Sarah spent Saturday sleeping late, nursing her bruises with ice packs, and trying not to think about what had happened. She called her sister Amy, told her a sanitized version of events that involved an aggressive drunk and a helpful bouncer, nothing more. She didn't mention Dante. Couldn't mention Dante. Because how would she explain the phone on her nightstand, the jacket hanging in her closet? The way her heart jumped every time she checked to see if he'd messaged her again? He didn't. All of Saturday, no messages, no calls. By Sunday afternoon, Sarah had almost convinced herself she'd imagined the intensity of their interaction, that he'd just been doing his job as a bar owner protecting his clientele, that she'd read too much into those gray eyes and that promise about protection. Then her doorbell rang. She checked the peephole, another lesson learned the hard way, and found Marco standing in her hallway, holding a large shopping bag with a designer logo she recognized from Fifth Avenue windows. She opened the door with the chain still engaged. "Marco?" "Ms. Mitchell." He nodded respectfully. "Mr. Romano asked me to deliver this. May I come in?" Every instinct told her to say no, but curiosity, and something else, something she didn't want to name, won out. She undid the chain and stepped back, letting the massive man enter her small apartment. He set the bag on her coffee table and pulled out a slim envelope, handing it to her before stepping back to a respectful distance. "What is this?" she asked, already opening the envelope. "Sarah. I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted to ensure you had what you needed. Inside you'll find a new phone. Keep mine for emergencies, but you should have your own. There's also a tablet with a security app already installed. It monitors your building's entrance and will alert you to any unusual activity. I've taken the liberty of having your locks changed. The new keys are in the envelope. I hope you'll forgive the presumption, but I need to know you're secure. Finally, there's a dress. I'm hosting a charity gala on Tuesday night at the Metropolitan Club. I would very much like you to attend, as my guest. If you're not interested, no obligation, but I hope you'll consider it. Yours, Dante." Sarah read the note 3 times, her heart pounding harder with each pass. He'd changed her locks? Installed security? That was insane, wasn't it? Controlling and overstepping and completely inappropriate. So why did she feel safer knowing he'd done it? She looked up at Marco, who waited patiently by the door. He changed my locks. Yes, ma'am. Only Mr. Romano and I have the master keys stored in his personal safe. You have the only copies of your keys. This is crazy, she said, but there was no heat in it. You know that, right? This is absolutely crazy. Marco's expression didn't change. Mr. Romano takes the safety of those under his protection very seriously. I'm not under his protection. He doesn't even know me. Respectfully, ma'am, I think he'd disagree. Marco moved toward the door. Will you be accepting his invitation for Tuesday? I don't know. I need to think. Of course, if you decide to attend, I'll collect you at 7. If not, simply let Mr. Romano know through the phone. He paused at the door. For what it's worth, Ms. Mitchell, I've worked for Mr. Romano for 8 years. I've never seen him take an interest in anyone the way he's taken an interest in you. Whatever happens, he'll keep you safe. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with a shopping bag full of expensive gifts and a head full of dangerous thoughts. She pulled the dress out first. Black silk, simple but elegant, with a designer label that probably cost more than her monthly rent. It would fit perfectly. Somehow she knew it without even trying it on. Dante Romano seemed like the kind of man who paid attention to details. The phone was top of the line, already configured with her contacts somehow transferred over. The tablet was sleek and professional, and when she opened the security app, she could see her building's entrance in real time, complete with facial recognition. Software that would alert her to any unrecognized visitors. It was too much. Way too much. But it also made her feel safe in a way she hadn't felt since, well, maybe ever. Sarah picked up the phone Dante had given her on Friday night and pulled up his number. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a long moment before she took a breath and pressed it. He answered on the first ring. Sarah. His voice was warm, pleased. Did Marco arrive? He did. And Dante, you can't just change someone's locks without asking them. I can, and I did. Are you angry? Was she? She should be. I don't know what I am. But you feel safer. It wasn't a question. Damn him, it wasn't a question because he already knew the answer. Yes, she admitted quietly. I feel safer. Good. She could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Will you come on Tuesday? Why do you want me there? A pause, then softer, more intimate. Because I want to see you again. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since Friday night. Because the idea of you sitting alone in your apartment while I'm at some boring gala makes me want to burn the whole event to the ground and come to Brooklyn instead. Sarah's breath caught. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're brave enough to ask for help when you needed it. I know you're strong enough to hold yourself together when most people would have fallen apart. I know you have beautiful eyes that go wide when you're surprised, and that you bite your lower lip when you're nervous. His voice dropped lower. And I know that I want to know everything else. Will you let me? This was insane. He was basically a stranger. A dangerous stranger who'd changed her locks and installed security and sent her a dress that probably cost more than her car. She should say no. She should hang up and return everything and forget this ever happened. Yes, she whispered instead. I'll come on Tuesday. Good. That single word held a wealth of satisfaction, of possession, of promise. Marco will collect you at 7. Wear the dress. And Sarah? Yes? I can't wait to see you. He hung up before she could respond, leaving her standing in her living room, with her heart racing and her mind whirling with the certainty that she'd just made either the best or the worst decision of her life. She'd worry about which one later. Tuesday arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. Sarah spent Monday second-guessing her decision approximately every 30 seconds. She almost called Dante a dozen times to cancel. She definitely shouldn't go. This was moving too fast. He was too intense, too everything. But every time she picked up the phone to cancel, she remembered the way he'd looked at her. The way he'd made her feel safe. the way his voice had sounded when he said he wanted to know everything about her. So she didn't cancel. Instead, she took the day off work, went to the salon, got her hair done in loose waves that cascaded over her shoulders, got her nails done in a subtle nude shade, tried on the dress and found, as she'd suspected, that it fit like it had been made for her. By 6:45, she was ready and absolutely terrified. Marco arrived at precisely 7, professional as always. The drive into Manhattan felt both too long and too short. Sarah's hands were shaking by the time they pulled up to the Metropolitan Club, where a red carpet stretched up marble steps and beautiful people in expensive clothes laughed and posed for photographers. "Mr. Romano is waiting inside," Marco said, opening her door. "Just tell the host you're his guest." The host took one look at her and smiled. "Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Romano is expecting you. Please, come with me." She followed him through marble halls decorated with crystal chandeliers and priceless art, past the main ballroom where the gala was in full swing, to a quieter corridor with fewer people. He stopped at a door marked private and knocked softly. "Come in." That voice. Sarah's pulse jumped. The host opened the door, and there was Dante, standing by a window overlooking Central Park, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He was wearing a tuxedo that had definitely been custom-made, all sharp lines and perfect tailoring, and when he turned to look at her, the intensity in his gray eyes nearly knocked her backward. "Sarah?" He set down his glass and crossed the room in 3 long strides. "You came. You sound surprised. I wasn't sure you would." His eyes traveled over her, taking in every detail of the dress, her hair, her face, with an attention that felt like a physical touch. "You're stunning." "So are you." The words slipped out before she could stop them, making him smile. A real smile this time. Not just the slight curve of his lips, but something genuine that transformed his harsh features into something almost boyish. "Dance with me." "I thought we were supposed to be at the gala." "We are at the gala, but I want you to myself for a few more minutes first." He extended his hand. "Dance with me, Sarah." She placed her hand in his, and he pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers as soft classical music filtered in from the ballroom. They swayed together in the quiet office, and Sarah felt her anxiety begin to melt away. "Thank you for the dress," she said softly, "and the security, and the locks. It's too much, but thank you." "It's not too much. Not for you." His thumb traced small circles on her waist, sending sparks of heat through the thin silk. "How's your wrist?" "Better. The bruises are fading." His jaw tightened. "I should have done more to that man than just throw him out." "You did enough. More than enough. You saved me." "No." He pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes fierce. "You saved yourself. You knew what to do. You asked for help. You were brave. I just made sure you got home safely. You did more than that. You made me feel safe. No one's made me feel that way in a long time." Something shifted in his expression, softening. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. About who I am." Her heart stuttered. "Okay. I'm not just a businessman who owns a few bars. My family, we have other interests. Complicated interests. I can't give you all the details, but I need you to understand that associating with me comes with risks. There are people who wouldn't hesitate to use you to get to me." Sarah pulled back slightly. "Are you saying you're—" "I'm saying that I'm powerful, and that power has been earned through means that aren't always pretty. I'm saying that I have enemies, and I'm saying that if you choose to be part of my life, you need to understand what that means." She should be afraid. She knew that. But somehow she wasn't. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I don't want there to be secrets between us. Because you deserve to make an informed choice. And because," he paused, his grip on her tightening, "because I'm going to ask you for something. And I need you to understand what you'd be agreeing to." "What are you going to ask me?" "Stay with me tonight. Not He shook his head quickly. Not like that. Not unless you want to. But stay. Let me show you my world. Let me take you to dinner after this gala, somewhere private where we can actually talk. Let me spend time with you without threats or fear, or anyone else interfering. Just us, getting to know each other. One night. To start, his thumb brushed along her jaw, the touch achingly gentle. I want more, Sarah. I'm not going to lie to you about that. From the moment I saw you in that booth, something in me recognized something in you. I want to know everything about you. I want to hear your stories, your dreams, your fears. I want to make you laugh. I want to keep you safe. He stopped, laughed softly. I'm getting ahead of myself. No. Sarah reached up, her hand covering his where it rested against her face. You're not. I feel it too. Whatever this is. It's crazy and too fast and probably a terrible idea. But I feel it. Then stay, please. Okay? The word came out barely above a whisper. Yes, I'll stay. The smile he gave her was worth every risk, every doubt, every moment of fear. He leaned down, his forehead touching hers, and for a long moment they just stood there, breathing the same air, existing in the same space. We should go to the gala, she finally said. People will wonder where you are. Let them wonder. But he pulled back, offering her his arm. Though I suppose I should at least make an appearance. I'm technically the host. You're hosting this? My company is. Annual charity event. I usually hate these things, but tonight... He looked down at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her knees weak. Tonight, I'm grateful for it, because it means you're here, on my arm, and everyone in that ballroom is going to know that you're with me. They stepped into the ballroom and heads turned. Of course they did. Dante Romano commanded attention the way gravity commanded planets, effortlessly and absolutely. But his attention never left Sarah, his hand warm and possessive at the small of her back as he guided her through the crowd. People approached, wealthy donors, business associates, women in expensive gowns who looked at Sarah with undisguised envy. Dante introduced her simply as Sarah, my guest, but the way he said it, the way he kept her close, made it clear she was more than just any guest. She met city councilmen and hedge fund managers, society wives and Broadway producers. And through it all, Dante never left her side, never made her feel out of place, never let anyone monopolize her attention for more than a moment. You're good at this, she murmured during a rare moment of privacy at their table. At what? Making me feel like I belong here, like I'm not just some random woman you invited. You're not random, and you do belong here. You belong anywhere you choose to be. He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. But between you and me, I'd much rather be anywhere else. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere it's just us. How much longer do you have to stay? Until I decide we're leaving. He stood, extending his hand. Which is right now. Come with me. She took his hand without hesitation, letting him pull her to her feet and guide her through the crowd toward the exit. A few people tried to stop him, but he brushed them off with practiced ease, his focus entirely on getting them out of the ballroom. Outside, his driver was already waiting with the town car. Dante handed her into the back seat and slid in beside her, close enough that their thighs pressed together, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. Where are we going? She asked as the car pulled away from the curb. My place. I have a private chef preparing dinner, unless... He turned to look at her, searching her face. Unless you'd prefer somewhere public. She should prefer somewhere public. Should insist on it, but your place sounds perfect. His apartment was in a building that probably cost more per square foot than most people made in a year. The private elevator opened directly into his penthouse, revealing floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the Manhattan skyline that took Sarah's breath away. This is incredible, she breathed, moving toward the windows. It's just a place. Dante came up behind her, close but not touching. Somewhere to sleep. To work. It's never felt like home. What would make it feel like home? I'm starting to have some ideas. His reflection smiled in the glass. Come, dinner should be ready. The dining room had a table that could have seated 20, but Dante had set just 2 places at one end, intimate and close. The food was incredible, some kind of braised short rib that melted on her tongue, paired with a wine that probably cost more than her monthly car payment. But the real magic was the conversation. Dante asked her about everything: her job as a marketing consultant, her family, her divorce 3 years ago, her hopes and dreams and fears. And he actually listened, his gray eyes intent on her face, asking follow-up questions that showed he was genuinely interested. In return, he told her about his own life. He'd grown up in Brooklyn, the oldest of 4 siblings. His father had died when he was 19, leaving him to take over the family business, and though he didn't spell out exactly what that business was, Sarah could read between the lines. He talked about his mother, still alive and living in Italy, about his siblings, scattered across the country, about the weight of responsibility he'd carried since he was barely more than a boy. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked, refilling both their wine glasses. They'd moved to the living room, sitting on his ridiculous expensive couch, their shoes kicked off and the city lights glittering below them. Taking over so young? Every day. He turned to look at her, and the honesty in his face was startling. And not at all. It made me who I am. But it also cost me. He paused. Normal. It cost me normal. The chance to date like regular people do, to fall in love without worrying about ulterior motives or safety risks, to trust easily. Do you trust me? Yes. No hesitation. I don't know why, but I do. From the moment I saw you, something in me just knew. You're real, Sarah. Not playing games, not trying to be something you're not. I could say the same about you. You're the most intense person I've ever met. But you're also, she struggled for the right word, genuine. You don't hide who you are. I can't. Not with you. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. Okay. What I said earlier, about wanting more, I meant it. This isn't casual for me. I don't do casual. I don't have time for games or drama or anything that isn't real. His hand slid down to cup her jaw, tilting her face up to his. I want you in my life. Not just for tonight, not just for a few dates. I want to know what makes you laugh at 2 a.m. I want to be the person you call when something good happens. I want to fall asleep with you and wake up with you and protect you from anything that might try to hurt you. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Dante? I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He leaned closer, close enough that his breath ghosted across her lips. Tell me you feel it too. Tell me I'm not insane. You're not insane. Her hand came up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart beating as fast as hers. I feel it too. This pull between us. Like I've known you forever. Like I've been waiting for you. Sarah. Her name was a prayer on his lips. Can I kiss you? Please. He kissed her like a man starving, like she was air and he'd been drowning. His mouth moved over hers with a devastating combination of gentleness and hunger, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious and breakable. Sarah melted into him, her fingers curling into his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. Stay tonight, he whispered. In the guest room if you want. I don't care. I don't want you to leave. I don't want to leave either. He smiled against her lips, kissed her again, softer this time. I'll get you something to sleep in. And tomorrow I'm taking you to breakfast, and then lunch, and then dinner, and then every meal after that for as long as you'll let me. Sarah laughed, the sound bright and free. That's a lot of meals. Not nearly enough. He pulled back, his eyes serious. I'm going to court you properly, Sarah Mitchell. I'm going to take you on dates and buy you flowers and make you laugh. I'm going to prove to you that this, us, is worth taking a chance on. I already know it is, she said softly. Good, but I'm going to prove it anyway. He stood, pulling her to her feet. Come on, let me show you to your room. And Sarah? Yes? Lock the door if you want to. I'll understand, but I hope... He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. I hope you don't feel like you need to. Not with me. She didn't lock the door. Instead, she lay awake in his guest room, which was bigger than her entire apartment, wearing one of his t-shirts and thinking about gray eyes and gentle hands and the way it felt to be seen. Really, truly seen. Around 2 a.m, her door opened quietly. Dante stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. Can't sleep either? She asked. Kept thinking about you being so close, but not close enough. He stayed in the doorway, respecting the invisible boundary. Would you mind if I just sat with you for a while? She pulled back the covers in answer, and he crossed the room, sitting on the edge of the bed. They talked for hours, about everything and nothing, their voices soft in the darkness. About her dreams of starting her own consulting firm. About his plans to expand his legitimate business interests. About their shared love of old movies and Italian food and autumn in New York. When Sarah finally drifted off, it was with Dante's hand in hers and his voice murmuring soft promises in the darkness. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she panicked. Where was she? Then memory returned along with a rush of warmth. Dante's apartment. She'd spent the night at Dante's apartment. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed in casual slacks, and a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing those scarred forearms. He was making breakfast, actual breakfast, not just coffee and toast, but eggs and bacon, and what looked like homemade pancakes. Good morning. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw her. I was going to bring you breakfast in bed. This is better. She moved to the counter, accepting the coffee he handed her. You cook? One of the few domestic skills my mother insisted we all learn. She said a man who can't feed himself is barely a man at all. He plated the food, then came around the counter to stand in front of her. How did you sleep? Better than I have in years. Good. He leaned down, brushing a soft kiss against her lips. I want you to always sleep that well, preferably in my bed, but we can work up to that. Sarah laughed, and he grinned, pleased with himself. They ate breakfast together, Dante stealing bites from her plate despite having his own, their feet tangling under the table. It felt domestic, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. I need to tell you something, Dante said as they cleaned up the dishes together. Sarah's heart skipped. Okay. My mother is coming to visit next week. She's going to want to meet you. Already? I told her about you. He looked almost sheepish. Last night, after you fell asleep. I called her, couldn't help myself, and she's Italian. She has opinions about me being 42 and unmarried. When I told her I'd met someone special, she immediately booked a flight. Wow. Sarah set down the dish she'd been drying. Dante, this is moving really fast. I know, and if it's too much, tell me. I'll slow down. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. No, that's a lie. I can't slow down. Not with you. But I can try to be less overwhelming about it. Sarah thought about her empty apartment in Brooklyn, about her quiet, careful life, about years of playing it safe, of not taking risks, of letting fear make her decisions. Then she thought about gray eyes and gentle hands, and the way Dante looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. Don't slow down, she said. I don't want you to slow down. This is terrifying and crazy, but it's the most alive I've felt in years. So no, don't slow down, and I'd love to meet your mother. The smile he gave her could have lit up all of Manhattan. He crossed the space between them in 2 strides, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around, both of them laughing like teenagers. You're sure? He asked when he finally set her down. Because once you meet my mother, there's no going back. She'll start planning the wedding immediately. The wedding? Sarah's eyes went wide. I'm kidding. Mostly. His hands framed her face. But Sarah, I need you to understand something. I told you I don't do casual. I meant it. I'm 42. Years old. I know what I want. And what I want? He paused, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. What I want is you. In my life. Every day. For as long as you'll have me. Dante! You don't have to say anything now. I'm not asking you to make promises. I'm telling you where I stand. So you know. So there's no confusion. He kissed her forehead, soft and sweet. Now, let me take you home so you can change. Then we're going to spend the day together. I'm going to show you all my favorite places in the city. And tonight we're having dinner with my siblings, because they've been texting me nonstop since last night demanding to meet the woman who's got me acting like a lovesick idiot. Their words, not mine. Sarah should be overwhelmed, should be running for the hills. Instead, she just smiled and said, Okay, show me your world, Dante Romano. And he did. He took her to a tiny Italian bakery in Little Italy, where the owner greeted him with kisses on both cheeks and insisted on loading them up with free cannoli. He showed her the community center his family funded, where kids from rough neighborhoods could go for tutoring and hot meals and a safe place to be. He walked her through the financial district, pointing out the buildings where his legitimate business interests operated, making her laugh with stories about stuffy board meetings and his constant battle to convince investors he was more than just his family name. For dinner, they met his siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, all of whom teased Dante mercilessly while making Sarah feel instantly welcome. They told embarrassing childhood stories and argued over who made the best Sunday gravy and made plans for Sarah to join their next family dinner. You've got him wrapped around your finger, Dante's sister Lucia whispered to Sarah during a trip to the bathroom. I've never seen him like this. It's good. You're good for him. I've only known him a few days, Sarah protested. So? Lucia laughed. Dante's never needed much time to make up his mind about anything. When he knows, he knows. And trust me, he knows about you. That night, when Dante drove her back to Brooklyn, Sarah invited him up to her apartment. They sat on her much less expensive couch, drinking wine and talking until past midnight. And when he finally kissed her goodnight at her door, she almost asked him to stay. Almost. Not yet, she whispered against his lips. But soon. Whenever you're ready. He kissed her again, deep and sweet and full of promise. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. Take all the time you need. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of dinners and phone calls, and stolen moments between their work schedules. Dante courted her exactly like he'd promised, with flowers delivered to her office, surprise lunch dates, tickets to shows she'd mentioned wanting to see. He introduced her to his world carefully, gradually, making sure she understood what she was getting into while also making her feel cherished every step of the way. His mother arrived and loved her immediately, pulling Sarah into her embrace and whispering in Italian-accented English that she'd prayed for someone like Sarah to find her stubborn son. Marco became a familiar presence, always professional but increasingly protective of Sarah herself, not just as an extension of Dante. And through it all, Sarah felt herself falling hard and fast and completely for the dangerous man with gentle hands who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. 3 weeks after that night at Romano's, Dante took her back to the Metropolitan Club. Back to that private office where he'd first asked her to dance. What are we doing here? Sarah asked as he led her inside. I wanted to recreate our first dance. He pulled her into his arms, that same classical music playing softly in the background. Seemed appropriate. Appropriate for what? Instead of answering, he stopped dancing, stepped back, and dropped to one knee. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Dante? Sarah Mitchell. He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple, elegant diamond that caught the light and scattered it in rainbow fractals across the walls. I know it's only been 3 weeks. I know everyone will say it's too fast, too crazy, too impossible. I don't care. I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am about you, about us. You make me want to be better. You make me laugh. You make me feel like maybe, despite everything I've done and everything I am, I deserve something good. Something real. You are the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I will spend every day of the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worth the risk you took on me. So please, marry me. Be my wife. Let me protect you and cherish you and love you for the rest of our lives. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. This is insane. I know. We barely know each other. I know. Everyone will think we're crazy. I know. He smiled up at her, and it was the most vulnerable she'd ever seen him. But do you love me, Sarah? Even a little? More than a little. The words came out choked with emotion. So much more than a little. I love you, Dante Romano. I love you so much, it terrifies me. Then marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life earning that love. Yes. She pulled him to his feet, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, yes, 1,000 times. Yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her like the world was ending, and she was the only thing keeping him grounded. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Mine, he whispered. Finally, mine. Yours, she agreed. Always yours. 6 months later, Sarah stood in a private garden in Italy, wearing a dress that had belonged to Dante's grandmother, surrounded by family and friends who'd become her own. As she walked down the aisle toward the man who'd saved her that night in the bar, the dangerous stranger who'd become her everything, she thought about all the twists and turns that had led her here. One frightening night. One angel shot. One man who'd seen her, really seen her, and decided she was worth protecting. Worth everything. Dante took her hand, his gray eyes bright with emotion, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Safe. Loved. Home. And when he said "I do" in that commanding voice that still sent shivers down her spine, when he kissed her as his wife for the first time while their families cheered and cried, Sarah Mitchell, no, Sarah Romano now, smiled against his lips and whispered the words that had started it all. Thank you for saving me. No, amor mio. He kissed her again, deep and sweet and full of promise. Thank you for saving me.